It is a day when important decisions must be made. We must have the 19th sanctions package in place. I expect that we will get that. It means further economic pressure on Russia. Both what does the shadow fleet include? What does oil and gas include? But also what does Russian diplomats include, where we are now starting to limit their ability to move around. Seen from an internal European perspective, I think the two most important things are that we must ensure that it is Russia that will pay for the Ukrainian economy. It is Russia that has destroyed large parts of the country. Therefore, I think it is quite natural that it is Russia that pays for the weapons that Ukraine needs to be able to defend itself. So, with this repair loan, I hope that we get so much in place today that the next step is for the Commission to come up with some concrete proposals that we can get adopted, so that Ukraine is not in a situation where they cannot run their society further. And then we are in a special security situation with a lot of unrest, and that is why this European rearmament is the most important thing. And I have a clear expectation that we will take the next steps already today in relation to this, that Europe should actually be able to defend itself by 2030 at the latest. Then there is some good news on the climate agenda. I think that today we will take the next steps, or can take the next steps, in terms of agreeing on a 2040 climate target. I am very happy with the decision that was made the other day in terms of phasing out Russian fossil fuels in Europe. So, well, there are times when you come here to Brussels, things look really difficult, and the world is very troubled. But my expectation is actually that today will be the peak where we will take some necessary next steps.
We are going to discuss, among other things, exactly what was included in the Ukraine Reparations Act or the Recovery Act, etc., which is based on these isolated Russian assets. But I would like to ask you, there are no guarantees that Ukraine can pay this loan back. We depend on what elements will be part of our travel agreement, including if you want to pay for the recovery of this loan. So what guarantees are there that this bill will not end up with the European taxes?
Well, I actually think it's almost genius, those who have come up with this, because there are some Russian funds that are already in Europe. And the idea is to let it be a kind of overdraft, where we can then transfer money to Ukraine without us Europeans having to pay it all. And from that point of view, we have actually been saying for some years now, let Russia pay for the war damage they have caused, also in relation to the reconstruction of Ukraine. Well, I actually think it's almost genius, those who have come up with this, because there are some Russian funds that are already in Europe. And the idea is to let it be a kind of overdraft, where we can then transfer money to Ukraine without us Europeans having to pay it all. And from that point of view, we have actually been saying for some years now, let Russia pay for the war damage they have caused, also in relation to the reconstruction of Ukraine. But now you can say, now we are at a point where we are taking a further step and saying, now they should actually also finance that there is a Ukrainian here, that is, a Ukrainian defense. We will do everything we can for the day that there may be a peace agreement, that this will be an element in it. But of course, there must be some form of guarantee. But if we don't go this route, then we all have to pay up front. Because if Ukraine can't stand its ground, then in our eyes, there is a risk that Putin will move on.
What is your reaction to transactions at the southern oil companies? Can this be so stupid that it can be followed?
Yes, that would be great, I would say. I have not heard from the Norwegian government whether this is something they intend to do. But even though Norway is not an EU country, they have been part of our sanctions packages and are a good support, one might say, for both European armament, but also for the efforts in relation to Ukraine. So for me, it would be natural for Norway to be involved in this, along with all the rest of us.
In Copenhagen, the members agree that individual members could take a further role on selected proposal projects. Where is Denmark to take a further role on the high-level schemes?
It is positive that today we are getting the aforementioned sanctions package in place, and that the Americans are simultaneously announcing sanctions in the oil sector. We have previously fully imposed some sanctions, and we are doing so today as well. I think that is really positive. The next step should be for Ukraine to get the weapons it needs to ensure that a European country does not lose this war. But right here and now, on the issue of sanctions, it is positive that the US and Europe are following suit. In any case, we are very active in ensuring that Europe can defend itself by 2030 at the latest. And a prerequisite for this to be possible is that we close some of the capacity gaps that exist today. That is, translated into Danish. Europe lacks some weapons, we lack some air defense, we lack drones, we lack anti-drone capacity to have a total defense here in Europe. And the way we think about European cooperation here is, of course, that NATO determines the overall security policy and defense policy. And what we can then use EU cooperation for is to make sure that we have a European defense industry that produces quickly enough, and that we more strategically purchase together and make some plans that ensure that we have the weapons that are needed. And if Denmark can play a positive role in that, we are always willing to take on that. But it must be with the very, very clear aim that something will come out in reality. We do not need more plans and more processes. We need what we also do in Denmark, namely buy. I would like to start by saying that it has kind of crept up on us lately. And I think most of all, it is an expression of the fact that we are so challenged in Europe on so many agendas that some are afraid that if we go too far on climate, if we get ambitious, well, then we will not be able to handle it in an economic context. What we are trying to do from the Danish side is to say, we think in all modesty that we are actually an example of the opposite. That is, we have almost full employment. We have very, very low unemployment. We have a healthy Danish economy. And a lot of that is actually connected to what we are doing in the climate area. A lot of Danes go to work because of the green transition, not despite the green transition. So we will continue to be some of the ones pushing forward. I actually think we can reach a common agreement on a new 2040 target. And of course, I am extremely happy that we have succeeded here under the Danish presidency and have reached an agreement on phasing out Russian oil and gas.
What more could we possibly do?
We have already not made a decision to proceed with deregulation the other day, but we are also because energy prices are too high. You can feel it in households, but you can also feel it in the European business community as a whole. So for me, one of the important things in the green transition now and in the climate fight is to reduce energy costs. And we can do that if we switch to cleaner energy sources. So I don't see it as a contradiction. In fact, I see it as the opposite, but that's also because I'm Danish.